All right, let's start. Oh, wait. I gotta share my screen. And there we go. Oh, no, 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 no. And, oh my God. All right, here we go. Constructing representations and regional specialization and organizations. The introduction. Our brain is constantly being bombarded by stimuli. Stimuli is basically anything that, basically our day-to-day lives is everything is stimuli. When we feel something, that's a stimuli. When we smell something, that's a stimuli. If we see something, that's a stimuli. Basically, our day-to-day interactions with us, other people, and the world around us is all comprised of stimuli. And we have to be thankful for our brain as it's adept at filtering this flood of information and making a decision on what actions to take. Because if we didn't have that capability to filter all this information, all this stimuli, we would be constantly disoriented and confused because all these sounds coming at us from different different places. We wouldn't know how to distinguish different sounds from different sources. It would all just be a jumble of words, noises, stuff like that. Our vision, it would be all messed up because we wouldn't know what is what. Everything would just be clustered together. This is just, again, an imagination of what would happen if our brain wasn't adept, because thankfully, not a lot of people, thankfully, most of all the people on Earth have brains that are adept at filtering this information. Only some cases have been registered where some people's brains are not fully developed, or they have like a mutation in their genes that basically makes their brain not fully operate, and they're being constantly disoriented by these type of things, and it's a very painful life. So to make sense of this chaotic world that we live in, we need some filters. And the first filter is that information is our perception from which our senses arise. So basically, what that means is that information that we receive is what we see. Is the information that we receive is how we see the world. That to simplify that, is just like basically watching a news source. From whatever news source you watch and whatever information that you get from that news source, such as let's say Fox News, then your views of the world and the politics in the world are based on the information Fox News gives you. Same with like CNN, NBC, and all the other news media companies out there. The next step for filtering all this information is interpreting these perceptions, which your brain does by comparing those memories to past experiences and observations. That last sentence basically describes how we learn things. We learn things by learning new information. Our brain, adapts to it, understands what it is, and then from that, we slowly build onto one skill and we become proficient in it, such as speaking. Like, well, language will be covered a lot later, so let me not give that example. Let's say playing video games. If you play a video game, you start out, you don't know what to do. There's usually a tutorial, but that doesn't correlate to real life. So you start off, you don't know what you're doing, you're just pressing random buttons, random things are happening, and then slowly you get, oh, this when I press this button I jump, or when I press this button I crouch, and then from that information you slowly build on. From crouching you go to sliding, from sliding you go to fighting and punching and kicking and all these combos you do. So basically, our brains are like that. We learn information and then we build onto that information to perform even more complex functions. That's just one of the beauties of our brain and how we are built and how we evolve. Now let's look at constructional representation. Our brain has a limit in which it can store information in our short-term memory, so it builds a fairly simple representation of people, places, objects, and events as references. So I really don't know how to simplify that more than it's already simplified, but what it's trying to say is that our brain has a limited short-term memory capacity. So that's why when we learn something, it usually stays in our short-term memory, and then when we sleep, or well, not all the time when we sleep, but I'm just like saying as an example, like when we go to sleep, then our brain filters the information, organizes what we learned from short-term memory, and then files it into our long-term memory inside our brain. That's how we basically remember things and learn things from kindergarten to high school. If we didn't have that long-term memory, the the ability to store information into our long-term memory, we would basically go nowhere in life. I wouldn't even know how to speak, because to speak, I must first learn how to, properly position my tongue to the roof of my mouth, to properly exhale air out of my mouth, to form simple words. If I didn't know how to do that, I would just talk like a baby for the rest of my life, which happens if we don't have that capacity to store information in a long-term memory. So to make sense of our moment-to-moment perceptions, the brain relies on its complex network of associations assembled from prior experience. Right now I can't talk. I'm pretty sure I'm losing my memory and losing how to talk. Like, it might just be happening. So what this is trying to say is that our decisions that we usually make, not even spontaneous decisions, even decisions that you think that you made on the spot, that you had no idea that you were going to make and you just made it right there, even those kind of decisions that your brain makes has prior experience and prior mistakes that you have made that it takes into account to take that spontaneous decision. So I'm trying to say is that spontaneous decisions have a lot of thought in the back of your brain that your brain makes before you say those or make those decisions in the real world. So these connections enable your brain to deal with variable perceptions, which we'll go on later. So constructing these representations relies on a semantic memory, which is a form of declarative knowledge that includes general facts and data. Scientists are just beginning to understand the nature and organization of cortical areas involved in semantic memory, but it appears that specific cortical networks are specialized for processing certain types of information. So basically what it says is certain areas are specialized for certain types of information. So like, just for an example, one area, this is totally probably not probably, this is not accurate at all. Like, it'll be like, oh, the front of your brain is for storing English and language, and the back of your brain is for math, and the sides are for science. It's basically trying to say that specific areas are meant for specific types of information. What I just said about the language, math, and science is totally false. That was just an example. Studies using functional brain imaging have revealed regions of the cortex that selectively process different categories of information, such as animals, faces, tools, or words. Like a fun fact that I want to say out is that, you've probably seen, videos of primates like apes, chimpanzees, using tools like a hammer drill, like a drill or a hammer. Those primates and those primates and animals basically have a more relatively evolved brain and special regions of that brain that allow them to use the tools and allow them to almost act human, that like they do. So, obviously they're not human because they evolved differently from us, we evolved differently from them, but their brains are evolved enough that they could use these tools precisely, and they could actually, make something with those tools. As far as I know, monkeys, apes, chimpanzees, those types of animals, primates, are the only types of animals that can use these tools very precisely. Another reason for that is they have opposable thumbs like us, but, their brain and having that ability and being evolved to selectively process these information in different categories is also what enables them to use tools and faces such as like we do. So constructive representation and concept cells. A recording of electrical activities of individual brain cells show that specific single cells may fire when someone looks at a photograph of a particular person, but remain quiet when viewing photographs of other animals, people, animals, or objects. So-called concept cells work together in assemblies. For example, the cells encoding the concept of needle, thread, sewing, and button may be interconnected. Such cells and their connections form the basis of our memory. So what that is saying is basically there are so-called concept cells that specifically work together to help you perform complex functions, such as some concept cells encode the concepts of a needle, and while others do thread and sewing. And then when you actually want to do all those together, or use all those to make something, it brings all those concept cells fire up, work together, and then allow you to do those complex functions. It's like I really don't know how to give a simpler example, but yeah, those concept cells are basically specialized areas which encode other concepts, and once they come together, they can help you perform even more complex functions. And such as like above, like when you look at a photograph of someone or like someone you realize is famous, like let's just say Trump. If you look at a photograph of Trump, some of your cells, some of your individual brain cells might fire up because your brain is accessing the information that recalls who Trump is and what you feel familiar with him about. So like it basically starts to recall how you know Trump, how you know who he is, and those cells fire up when you look at a photograph of him because your brain is preparing you to, learn new information about him or have like, a conversation with him or something like that. So brain is just pulling a backup memory just in case you need to access it at any time. But when you look at a photograph of something totally random, your brain cells may not fire up as you may not have prior knowledge about it. You may not relate to it that much. You may not have experience contacting, or you may not have much experience dealing with that particular thing in the photograph. So your individual brain cells might not fire up, which is pretty cool because if your individual brain cells fired up at every random thing and pulled up every random tidbit of fact from the back of your memory, it would be really confusing because in the back of your head, you'll be like, oh, monkey, and then you won't suddenly remember a useless fact about a monkey, and then it would just be confusing. So it's really interesting how your brain knows which cells to access for that specific type of information. It's really something to wonder about, It's like, how does it happen? Concept cells reside in the temporal lobe, a brain area that specializes in object recognition. Similarly, our understanding of thinking and language has been informed by studying people with unique deficits caused by particular patterns of brain damage. So our understanding of thinking and language has actually been informed by not studying, people who have fully functioning brains, but people with unique deficits that, might have been caused by brain damage, basically caused by brain damage, any form of brain damage, whether you got hit in the head with like a baseball bat or, it's like genetic disease or something. So those unique deficits are actually what scientists use to study to understand our thinking and language. It's kind of like, reverse engineering. You have the full product, but you don't know how exactly it works. So you take a product that doesn't have all the parts and then see what parts you can add or what parts are missing to then for that product to start working. So basically they kind of reverse engineered, not really, but I'm just saying they sort of use the reverse engineering technique to understand our thinking and language. They would see what brain cells fire up in our normal human being and what brain cells fire up in the people who have those unique deficits. And they see, let's just say in person A who has a normal functioning brain, that cell A and B light up when they see a picture of a dog and cell C doesn't light up. But for a person with a unique deficit, cell B only lights up while cell A and cell C don't. So, that's how they figured out, this, and this, and then they built upon that information using concept cells as well as all the stimuli and the perception of our information that slowly built on their information to understand how our brain actually works. Regional specialization and organization. Experts have learned that damage to certain areas of the temporal lobes leads to problems with recognizing and identifying visual stimuli. This condition, called agnosia, occurs in several forms depending on the exact location of the brain. Regional specialization and organization. Well, I read the title again. One such region is the fusiform face area. Located on the underside of the temporal lobe, the FFA is critical for recognizing faces. That's how we recognize who our parents are, who our friends are, who our teachers are. If a person doesn't have, if a person has a deficit or damage to their FFA region, they will not be good with faces. They might remember everything about you, like your name, what your relationship is with them, but they will not recognize your face. They'll recognize your voice, but they couldn't recognize your face. The distinct area responds more strongly to images than without faces, and bilateral damage to this area results in prosopagnosia or face blindness. Sorry if I butchered that word. Similarly, a nearby region called the parahippocampal place area responds to specific locations such as pictures of buildings or particular senses. Other areas are activated only by viewing certain inanimate objects, body parts, or sequence of letters. These parahippocampal regions, the paragnosia regions, those areas the scientists are still studying it, but they think it's comprised of specific concept cells. Like in the parahippocampal region, the concept cells that exist there store or encode the information of locations, pictures, and buildings and other particular senses, while in the proaspinasia area, or the FFA area, concept cells exist where it stores information about faces. And, basically that's the memory area where you recognize who your parents are by their face. So those areas are made up of certain types of concept cells that encode certain types of information. Regional specialization and organization. Within these brain areas, information is organized into hierarchies. One example of this organization is with the way brain represents words. I may have typed that twice, so disregard that one, the second one. Together, these areas form the semantic system, a constellation that responds more strongly to words than to other sounds, and even more strongly to natural speech than to artificially garbled speech. Like what I just did there, some of you probably didn't understand what I said. That's the reason. The semantic system occupies a significant portion of the human brain, especially compared to the brain of other primates. This is the reason why we can have full-length conversations with each other, why we just don't speak a caveman language like ooga booga booga. Like our mind can process and chain words into specific ways, and we can express ourselves. This is like one of the main reasons why we have reached this place that we have. Without the ability to communicate this fast and communicate this easily, like, it's really hard for us, because if we didn't have language, it would be really hard to communicate with each other, because there's like it'll be really hard to create like a whole alphabet or a whole written language that includes every aspect of our lives. Like back then, hieroglyphs from ancient Egypt, they probably worked because they had a relatively lower day-to-day functions. What they did, they probably had, oh, go here, go there, I have 5 goats, you have 5 gold necklaces. But now our entire human life is so complicated that it would be inconvenient, as well as really hard to come up with like just pictures and pictograms for every single thing that we do. This is why our human race has thrived as long as it is, because the ability to communicate with each other is such an important aspect. Ask any gamer who's ever played a game. Just ask them how important communication is. Ask any gamer, ask literally any person in the army. Communication is key to the way of our life and how we live, and we should be really thankful that we can speak. Regional specializations and organizations. Separate areas within the system encode representation of concrete or abstract concepts, action verbs, or social information. Words related to each other, such as month and week, tend to activate the same areas, whereas unrelated words, such as month and tall, are processed in separate areas of the brain. Written language. Written language involves additional brain areas. The visual word area from VWFA and the fusiform gyrus recognizes written letters and words, a finding that is remarkably consistent across speakers of different languages. Studies of the VWFA reveal connections between it and the brain areas that process visual information, bridges that help the brain link meaning to written language. These concepts are represented in the parietal cortex with input from the occipitotemporal cortex, a region that participates in visual recognition and reading. These regions work together to identify the shape of a written number or a symbol and connect it to its concepts. Thus, the end. Thus, through constructing hierarchical connected representations of concepts, the brain is able to build meaning. All of these skills depend on the fluid and efficient retrieval and manipulation of semantic knowledge. Basically, what it's saying is our brain starts from the simplest of things by storing information that we learned into short-term memory, into concept cells. Then those concept cells are specialized into different areas, such as the pro-hippocampal area or the FFA. Those concept cells then work together to provide a specific function, such as the pro-hippocampal location on your brain recognizes places and locations with ease, while the FFA is good with faces. Then those areas work together and they bridge across each other, help each other to link words, to help link information to each other, such as words to meaning. If we didn't have that link, if our brain didn't have that capacity to link information to each other, words wouldn't serve no purpose, because we wouldn't know what it means. We wouldn't know what water bottle means. For example, if our brain didn't have the capacity, water bottle would just be something that we just say for fun that has no meaning, no concept. Because if our brain didn't know that a water bottle means something that can hold the water, it would just be difficult to live life, you know? And we should be really thankful that the humans evolved in the way we have, that I'm able to talk to you guys, you know, make this slideshow presentation, have this entire conversation with you. I'm able to write, I'm able to even make this entire presentation. I'm able to work on this computer. It's such a marvel of our human brain. It's such a marvel. We don't even know what we're made of. Like, if you think about it, we're not, you know, skin, flesh, and bones. We're literally just a brain and a bunch of neurons, and you know, we're just a brain, but we're just our brain and the nervous system, literally just sending information and sending stimuli and commands on what to do. Like, I'm not this bone. This finger is not me. This body is not me. We are all literally just a brain and a bunch of nerves and neurons. It's really something to think about, that we don't even know who we are yet, or we don't even know what the human is capable of. And to do this, we must further push the neuroscience field and get, you know, spark interest in the younger generation, because if this goes away, if the, you know, the next generation loses interest in neuroscience, we would never fully understand how we work. We would never fully understand how we tick and what makes us human. So yeah, goodbye. Well, I didn't stop the video.